Hello, it's me again. Friday. Hopefully, everyone is ready for the weekend. I think I'm going to Boston this weekend. Yeah, overnight. My son has a hockey game in Boston. He lives in Connecticut, but we might get to see him. Yeah, most of the night. So that'll be cool. Hopefully, you have some awesome plans. Anybody wants to just raise their hand and talk about what they are doing this weekend? Probably a little early for apple picking, right? But hopefully, it's getting to be apple picking time. Still a little warm. Ooh, although this morning, I'm recording this on a Thursday. It was a little cool this morning. Fall. It felt like fall. All right. So, yesterday we got a little bit of the exposition out of the way, a little bit of the backstory. And today we're going to get full fledged into the problem, into the conflict. And I'm hoping yesterday during class, somebody or a few people said maybe the big conflict of the story for our protagonist is going to be person versus self. Like we're going to see here today again, he is going to feel ashamed about the way he is feeling. And that is going to be juxtaposed against what his sister is feeling. I mentioned juxtaposed once, and it might have been only in one class, but it is good to talk about. I think it was only one class. Does anybody know juxtaposed? I'll pause right here. All right, juxtaposed is when the author presents two very different things side by side. I tried to do that in Frank and Beans. I tried to have a chapter where we went to Frankie's house. It's all like crumbling, wet carpet smell, that kind of stuff. And I tried to juxtapose that against Mr. B's like neatly trimmed hedges. Like Mrs. B had a pristine floor. Frankie sweat on it. And he was like, oh my gosh, he was. So I wanted to make those two houses feel very different when I presented them right next to each other. I would argue, I didn't write the medicine bag, but I would argue that the author is going to try to do that here. They present our main character, and right next to that, we have the little sister. Notice she's the little sister. She's going to have a slightly different reaction, and those two things happen almost like back to back. Let's pull this thing up. And before we get to reading this page, now I could ask you to do this on a Google form, where you write it out, but I think it would be more beneficial if we discussed it in class. All right. So on the side here, there's something called like a close read. Hopefully you can see that right there. Annotate. When you see that word annotate, think something about writing something down, making little notes. That's what annotate means. So in paragraphs 12 and 13, we're not quite there yet, but we will be. And paragraphs 18 and 21 that show how the narrator and Cheryl each greet Grandpa. Why are their greetings so different? What can you conclude about Martin and his sister by the way they greet Grandpa? So what we're going to try to do here as a class, we don't have to write it down. We'll have a discussion. Narrator, little sister, very different. Why? That kind of stuff. Okay. Let's get into the reading here. I think we ended right at the top. Yeah. Hi, I muttered with my head down. I tried to pull my hand away when I felt his bony hand trembling, and then looked up to see fatigue in his face. I felt like crying. I couldn't think of anything to say, so I picked up Grandpa's suitcase, took his arm, and guided him up the driveway to our house. Mom was standing on the steps. I don't know how long she had been watching, but her hand was over her mouth, and she looked as if she couldn't believe what she saw. Then she ran to us. Grandpa, she gasped. How in the world did you get here? She checked her move to embrace Grandpa, and I remembered that such a display of affection is unseemly to the Lakota and would have embarrassed him. So it seemed like when I first read that paragraph, I wasn't like quite sure what was going on. But apparently, after reading it a couple times, she hesitated before hugging him. And I guess that would have been a sign of disrespect in the Lakota tribe. Now, my question to you is, why did she do that? I'll pause here and then we can play. And I'm probably thinking, well, it's no right answer. Maybe there's some wrong answers, but it could be. It's plausible that he looks so bad, like so weary, so much fatigue in his face. She worried that she would hurt him if she hugged him like too hard. She wanted to check herself. Or it could be just like, oh my gosh, she couldn't put two and two together. Like, you're here, just didn't make sense to her. And I don't know if that's ever happened to you, but I've done that to my parents before. So maybe I lived in Alabama for like 7 years. And so there were many like holidays I never got to see my parents. But one year when I was in college, I told my parents I wasn't coming home for Thanksgiving, and I surprised them. My wife and I surprised them right at the door. So we were just standing there, knocked on the door, and the looks on their faces, like they couldn't place it. Wait, I thought you were like 1,500 miles away. Like, what's going on here? It could be that. Could be that. Like, he just looks so old, though, unfortunately. All right, let's bring this up here. Continue reading. We got to figure out. We just saw the narrator's greeting. We saw the mom's greeting, and now we're going to see Cheryl's greeting here in a minute. Grandpa, she gasped. No, sorry. So there's another, like, probably Lakota term there. How, Marie? He said as he shook Mom's hand. She smiled and took his other arm. As we supported him up the steps, the door banged open and Cheryl came bursting out of the house. She was all smiles and was so obviously glad to see Grandpa that I was ashamed of how I felt. Grandpa, she yelled happily, you came to see us. Grandpa smiled, and Mom and I let go of him as he stretched out his arms to my 10-year-old sister, who was still young enough to be hugged. Sorry, I don't know what that is, but a lot of times when they just like put in, a lot of times these books or whatever, they'll put in a different language and then right after they kind of translate it for you. So whatever that is probably means little girl. He greeted her and then collapsed. Okay, that's not good. He had fainted, and Mom and I carried him into her sewing room where we had a spare bed. This is a good time that we could stop, pause, talk about that juxtaposition. Got Martin, the narrator, Cheryl. What's the difference? Why? I'll pause right there. And just in case you're watching at home, I'll say more quickly, hopefully what we said out loud in class is that, Cheryl's 10 years old. She's not a teenager yet. So she's like not as self-aware. She's still a little kid. She doesn't mind bouncing around the room or whatever, just being happy about things. You probably know when you get to be 13, 14, like, can't be happy about anything. When some of you walk in the morning, it's like, probably shouldn't talk to them. They look grumpy. And hey, who can blame you? It sucks, right? Being in the 7th or 8th grade. 9th grade, I think, gets better. I think 7th grade is the worst. 8th grade's the second worst. It's not a fun time to be alive. Hey, if you are loving life, if you are having a decent time being a 13 or 14-year-old, you're winning. Life is only going to get better. At least that's how it was for me. So he's at that age where he's like very aware of what other people think, right? Yeah, it's hard. Being a teenager is hard, especially being on the younger side of teenagers, 13, 14. Again, 15, I think it gets better. By the time you're 18, it gets better. 20s are hard, though. We don't have to talk about that right now. Let's make this bigger. So he fainted right at the top there. After we had Grandpa on the bed, Mom stood there patting his shoulder. You made Grandpa comfortable, Martin, she decided, while I called the doctor. I reluctantly, it's good. It's a good word to know there. I reluctantly moved to the bed. Let's pause there. Reluctantly. What does that mean? I'm sure somebody knows. All right, hopefully we pause there. Reluctantly means you didn't want to do it. Maybe this morning you reluctantly got out of bed. Didn't want to do it. You did it eventually. Teenagers probably do most things reluctantly, right? I don't really want to do it. I'd just rather be in bed sleeping. Hey, you are growing though, right? This is probably the time in your life, one of the times in your life where you're growing the most. You need your energy. You need your sleep. You need to play those video games, sitting down, immobile, not moving. Don't tell your parents I said that though. I don't want to get in trouble. Just want you can get in trouble for that. I don't want to get in trouble. I get in trouble for enough stuff. I reluctantly moved to the bed. I knew Grandpa wouldn't want to have Mom undress him, but I didn't want to either. He was so skinny and frail that his coat slipped off easily. When I loosened his tie and opened his shirt collar, I felt a small leather pouch that hung from I don't want to say that word. You can read that word. It does mean like a thin piece of leather right there, but you might hear it used in a different way, around his neck. I left it alone and moved to remove his boots. The scuffed old cowboy boots were tight, and he moaned as I put pressure on his legs I don't even think I want to say that. Let's move down to here, right there. But when I first read this, I don't know. Let's pause. I'm wondering, why are his boots so tight? Pause it there. Now we're back. I thought because, oh man, for a couple reasons, but if he's having heart trouble, and unfortunately I know this because of family members who have had heart trouble, when their heart isn't pumping blood like it should, kind of gravity takes over. And I don't even like thinking about this, but makes my feet hurt. But blood will pool in the bottom of the body, like first the feet and then the bottom of the legs. So like puffy legs and feet are caused by poor circulation. I also thought his feet might be swollen because he walked so far from like the bus station. I don't know how far it was from the bus station, but he must have been walking for a while. And they did provide us a picture of boots. I don't know if I can find it now, but did we already get to the boots? But they do provide, there they are. I don't know if those are the actual boots he was wearing in the story, but they were probably something similar. Not the best for walking, especially when you're an older guy. All right. Of course, I lost my place. There you go. But it's not because of the swollen. It's because of something else. We'll find out right here. I put the boots on the floor and saw why they were so tight. Each one was stuffed with money. I looked at the bills that lined the boots and started to ask about them, but Grandpa's eyes were closed again. We'll finish this page and be done. Mom came back with a basin of water. Doctor thinks Grandpa might be suffering from heat exhaustion, she explained, as she bathed Grandpa's face. Mom gave a big sigh. Oh, I don't know how to say that, but maybe it's like son or something like that. Martin, how do you suppose he got here? We found out after the doctor's visit, Grandpa was angrily sitting up in bed while Mom tried to feed him some soup. Tonight, you let Marie feed you, Grandpa, said my dad, who had gotten home from work. You're not really sick, he said as he gently pushed Grandpa back against the pillows. Doctor thinks you just got too tired and hot after your long trip. And that's probably getting to be a good place to stop. This went on a little bit longer than normal, but hopefully not too bad for you. This is a long, short story, so we will be spending most of next week reading this, and then eventually a Google form will be available, and that will probably be due by Friday. We'll have to figure it out. A lot of times with due dates, it's very flexible. If we get to it, we get to it. I'll let you know in plenty of time. If not, push the date back. Life is short. Come on. All right. Due dates. They can be moved. All right. Hope you have a good rest of the day.